Over the past few days, I've released videos about a wide variety of different subjects. I've talked about the ways that user feedback has improved the demo. I've talked about new features and my plans for the future. I've talked about the origin of the Stalker House stealth mission. And I've talked about the ways that future rivals will be different from Osana. But there are still a few questions that you might want me to answer. When will the crowdfunding campaign be launched? When will Amai be released? And when will Yandere Simulator be finished? In this video, I'll tell you the answers to those questions. First, let's define the criteria for implementing a new rival in Yandere Simulator. The rival must have unique circumstances that prevent the player from killing her without any effort. The rival must interact with Senpai multiple times per day in scripted events, and the player must have the ability to sabotage those events. The rival must have at least one unique elimination method that only applies to her. The rival must have a Befriend-Betray side quest. The rival must have a suitor, and the rival must have cutscenes for meeting Senpai, confessing to Senpai, and potentially a few other circumstances. Each rival is meant to feel as different from the other rivals as possible. Giving them lots of events and circumstances is essential for making each week of the game feel unique. So with that in mind, you might be wondering exactly how long it will take to fulfill all of this criteria. The good news is that putting most of this stuff into the game won't require any further programming than what I've already done. For example, the matchmaking process is the same for every rival. The only thing that differs between them is their suitor. When I put new rivals into the game, I won't need to write any new code to get the matchmaking feature to function for them. All I need to do is tell the game the ID numbers of the rival and the suitor, and the feature will function perfectly. I've already tested it. All of the suitors are already in the game, so the only things I'm missing are some voiced lines for them to say when you befriend them, and the feature will be complete for every rival. Everything I just said also applies to other areas of the game too, such as the confession sequence. The code for making a rival put a note into Senpai's locker and wait for him under the cherry tree is already in the game. No further work is necessary there, just new animations and voiced lines for each rival's confession. Although I do plan to make each rival's events as different from one another as possible, I can reuse the code from Osana's events as a template, so that future events go into the game much faster. All I'm going to need are new animations and voiced lines. Giving the rivals unique circumstances will be easy too, because they'll be using mechanics that are already programmed into the game, such as making a character follow another character around school. The only things that might be required are, you guessed it, new animations and voiced lines. By now, I'm sure you can see the point that I'm trying to make. Most of the code-related work to implement the remaining rivals has already been done. From a programming standpoint, dropping new rivals into the game will be quick and easy. However, to make each rival feel like a distinct character, the game will require an abundance of new animations and voiced lines. Otherwise, every rival would feel identical, and eliminating them would just feel like eliminating Osana 10 times in a row. Up until now, Yandere Simulator has relied entirely upon the assistance of generous volunteers creating assets for me in their spare time. I've always been immensely grateful for their help, but sometimes I might have to wait weeks or months until there is an opening in their schedule. For the rest of the game's development, it would be much better to hire professionals to work full-time on creating the assets I need to complete the rivals. Paying a team of animators to make hundreds of animations and paying a team of voice actors to record thousands of voiced lines is going to cost a lot of money, and that's the reason why I've suggested the idea of a crowdfunding campaign to raise the budget that Yandere Sim requires to reach completion. The crowdfunding campaign will have multiple goals. The bare minimum goal is to raise enough money to pay some animators and voice actors to make the remaining assets that the game needs. With more money, I could hire a software engineer to replace me as the game's programmer. With even more money, I could pay 3D artists to replace any low-quality assets that are currently in the game. Past that point, I would be able to implement wishlist features, such as a female senpai, a male protagonist, or an alternate story mode where you play as Yandere-chan's mother attending school in the 1980s. Even if the crowdfunding campaign is only able to hit the bare minimum goal, Yandere Simulator's future would be secured, and you would probably start to see new rivals appearing in the game every few months. It's exciting to think about how bright the game's future could be if the crowdfunding campaign is a success. But even though it's not pleasant to think about, you might be curious what'll happen if the crowdfunding campaign does not succeed. The answer is that I would still continue to work on Yandere Simulator, but there would be a strong possibility that the final game would not contain any new assets aside from the ones that are present in the demo. Every rival after Osana might not have any voice acting, and might just reuse old animations. Every cutscene would involve the characters popping between static poses. The art assets that are currently in the game would never be improved or replaced. Each rival would feel like a copy of Osana with different hair, rather than feel like a distinct character offering a unique experience. The future of the game really does hinge entirely on the success or failure of the crowdfunding campaign. So, naturally, you're probably wondering exactly when it's going to occur. And the answer is, it's complicated. Before I can launch the crowdfunding campaign, there's a lot of work I need to do. I need to research campaigns that succeeded and analyze what they did right. I need to research campaigns that failed and analyze what they did wrong. I need to talk with other game developers who operated successful campaigns and ask them for advice. I need to think up rewards for backers, preferably digital rewards instead of physical ones that would cost a bunch of money to ship. I need to plan how to announce the campaign before it begins and how to draw attention to it while it's happening. Perhaps I'll even prepare some sort of huge, exciting surprise that'll get millions of eyes on the game, and launch the campaign directly afterwards. And maybe I should even consider making some further improvements to the demo, just to make sure that it leaves the best possible impression on everyone who's going to be playing it before they decide whether or not they want to contribute to the campaign. At this point in the video, I'd like to take the time to preemptively answer a couple of questions that I'm sure will come up in the comments section. The first question I anticipate is, why doesn't Yandere just use his Patreon money to hire a team? There are two answers to that question. The first answer is that the amount of money I'm making through Patreon is nowhere near the amount that would be required to pay a team of professionals to work full-time for an extended period. The second answer is that my Patreon income is not the game's budget. It's my payment for working on Yandere Simulator. It's my salary, not the budget. The purpose of a Patreon is usually to pay one person to keep doing what they're doing on a monthly basis. The purpose of a crowdfunding campaign is to raise a massive amount of money all at once, so that a project can get the budget it needs to reach completion. With that said, whenever my Patreon income goes past a certain threshold, all of that extra money is put towards Yandere Simulator. However, we are not currently past that threshold. I'll include some links in the video description if you'd like to learn more about how the Patreon money is spent. The second question I anticipate is, how much of the money raised through the crowdfunding campaign will go to Yandere Dev? And the answer is 0. The purpose of the crowdfunding campaign is to raise enough money to pay people to create the assets necessary to finish Yandere Simulator, and that is exclusively what the money will be used for. Not a single cent of it would go into my own pocket. So, when will Yandere Simulator be finished? Well, if the crowdfunding campaign fails, then there's not very much more I can add to the game, aside from what's already in it. The game would be released in the very near future with no new voice acting, no new animations, no new art assets, and each of the rivals would feel nearly identical to one another. On the other hand, if the crowdfunding campaign just barely manages to meet the minimum budget, then I could guarantee that the final game would have full voice acting, unique animations for each rival, and lots of variety in each week. However, without the budget required to hire a programmer to replace me, the speed of the game's development would continue to be dependent entirely on my personal availability as I continue to split my attention between my many different responsibilities. So, you'd probably have to wait a few more years for the final product to come out. But if the crowdfunding campaign raises enough money to meet the stretch goals, that would completely change everything. Not only would the final game be guaranteed to have better art assets all around, but I could even hire a professional software engineer to completely replace me as the game's lead programmer, which would cause development speed to increase immensely. It would still take some time to put the game together, but nowhere near as much time as it would take if I was working alone. If you're wondering when Amai will be finished, well, the original plan was that I wouldn't put any work into her whatsoever until after the crowdfunding campaign had concluded. But I've already deviated from that plan. It's possible that, in the near future, I will work on all of the rivals in bits and pieces simultaneously, instead of going in a straight line from Amai to Megami. I might decide to let the player experience some of these bits and pieces in the game's demo, similar to the Amai challenge. So, the answer to the question, when will Amai be released, is honestly pretty unclear at this point in time, and will be largely dependent on the outcome of the crowdfunding campaign. So, that leaves us with just one final question. When will the crowdfunding campaign be launched? This is the most tricky question of all, and the honest answer is, I don't know yet. First, I'll need to do all of the research and preparations necessary to give the crowdfunding campaign the highest chance of success. Then, I'll need to learn everything that would make people feel uncomfortable with financially supporting the development of Yandere Simulator, and do my best to address their concerns. I also have to consider the fact that it might be a terrible mistake to try launching a crowdfunding campaign during the current global circumstances. So maybe I should wait for that to be over before I start asking people to fund a video game. In summary, when finish? I dunno. When am I dunno. When crowdfund? I don't know. I wish I could give you more concrete answers, but there are just too many unknown factors at this point in time. What I can tell you is what I plan to do in the immediate future. It's going to be a mix of several things. In addition to doing all of the research necessary to prepare for the crowdfunding campaign, I'm also going to be releasing some further fixes and improvements to the demo, and I'm also going to be preparing some exciting surprises that will hopefully paint a clear picture of how cool the final game could be if the crowdfunding campaign succeeds. Now that I've said just about everything I wanted to say about the game's development, I finally feel comfortable with the idea of releasing some just-for-fun videos that aren't related to development, such as the ones that will be coming out tomorrow and the next day. I hope that this video has helped to give you a clear picture of where we currently are in the game's development and what you can look forward to in the future. Thank you for following the development of Yandere Simulator.